Hi there and welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby. We are the People's Podcast, providing a platform for rugby lovers to come together and support the game that's played in heaven. I'm your host, Mitch, and with me is Lockie. Lockie, how are you this week?
Good, Mitch. It's good to see you back in action, but I've got to confess I'm in mourning. I'm in mourning after being down at Ballymore yesterday for the Hospital Cup final and watching my Wests being robbed at the death. But no, not really. It was a damn good game though. Congrats to brothers, and just good to get some live footy in. What have you been up to, Mitch?
Does it make it easier losing a final when it's close, or losing by 15? What do you think?
I think I'd rather lose by 15, so you know it's coming. But it was a last play of the game. Wests had an attacking line out, rolled them all a good track of the way, went over the line, and the call was held up from the referee. But that's the deal in those moments. We had other opportunities to kick a three. There was some great tries from both teams. Big Harry Wilson took out man of the match in that game. So lots of Super Rugby and Test players on the field. It was really high quality, and there was obviously Shoot Shield, John I. Dent and Dewar Shield all happening this weekend. So it was a
finals all around Australia.
Yeah, it's awesome, mate. Now, what have you been up to?
Yeah, I've watched the Wallabies this morning, and unfortunately we will have to rip that Band-Aid off shortly and talk about that. Not the result we were hoping for. Eddie is going into the World Cup 0 from 5, so definitely not the start of his Wallabies tenure that he would have been wanting. But we will get to that. There has been some massive games of rugby over the weekend. You just touched on some of the local stuff. We have also had the final warm-ups of the various nations before the World Cup kicks off in 2 weeks' time. So some pretty exciting results. If you don't know them, I won't say them here because we will talk about them a little bit later, but some really exciting games to chat through. And then we have the World Cup kicking off in 2 weeks. So I guess something that our fans have been asking for a while, and we've been whispering about if we're going to do it or not. We are. I can officially confirm that we are running a tipping comp. We're actually running 2 tipping comps of sort this year for the World Cup. So on Super Brew, we have the Predictor competition, World Cup Predictor it's called. So if you do want to join us, we already have 41 members in there, which is a great start considering it's only a few days old. But we want to get that number up. We want to get this one of the bigger comps going around for the World Cup. So if you are interested in joining us, go onto the app, search Pick and Drive Rugby. We should come up. If not, you can search for us via the pool code MANYJUNE. So that's the first one. And the second one is we're also running a World Cup fantasy competition. Now, to be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure how this works yet. I haven't been able to read through the rules and work it out, but it is a little bit different. We have had a few people come in and ask for one of these. So we are running that as well. I believe we can have any players we want in term, as long as it doesn't overreach a salary cap or some kind of talent system. But if you are interested in joining that, we do currently have 21 members in that competition. Do search for us in that Pick and Drive Rugby, or you can search for our pool code VATSSLAT. So yeah, do please get involved. We'll also have those links on our social media platforms as well. So it shouldn't be too hard for you to find and to get involved. What are we going to talk about this evening? So we have the Wallabies game against France, the final warm-up match before the World Cup begins. We'll chat through that game, chat through the results, get our thoughts on that. Australia A played over the weekend as well against Portugal. We haven't actually been able to watch that game. It's a bit of confusion whether it was or wasn't streamed, but for the most part, I don't think we have seen much of it. But we will chat through some of the team selections and the result. Then we'll dive into some of the other results from the weekend round of rugby that was, I guess they're kind of calling it the Autumn Nation series, but the final warm-up tests before the World Cup. And then next week, we will do our full World Cup preview episode. We'll go through all the competition of the World Cup that's kicking off in France in 2 weeks' time. We'll go through the Australia games. We'll do a little bit of a preview on each one of those and maybe sort of announce how we think, who the favourites are leading into the competition and how the tournament's shaping up so far. Anything else I've forgotten there, Lockie?
No, that's pretty comprehensive, I think. Let's just rip in.
right, we return now, and everybody, hi, I'm here, Ando. Yeah, I had some tech issues that meant I wasn't able to be here in the first part of the pod, but I am.
Yeah, apologies, everyone. I
And
forgot
it is-
to mention that Ando was coming, or hopefully coming at some point. I kind of just took over the reins of the intro and just did it on the fly. So not as
You're the
polished
man,
as what you normally do, Ando, but we
Mitch.
got there in the end.
We got there in the end. That's what matters. And unfortunately, that is what the Wallabies were unable to do against France. Despite some occasional good moments, and there were a couple of good moments throughout the match, we got absolutely pumped 17-41. And I really hope that if you're an Australian-based listener of the pod that you didn't get up at 1:45 a.m. to watch this game. Personally, I woke up at 5 a.m. to watch this game, and that was bad enough. So we're going to go through this in all of its glory, try and pull out some positives where possible. But Lockie, I just want you to start off immediate reactions. Where did it go wrong for the Wallabies?
We went wrong in the 7th minute when they scored a first phase try through a Dunty crash ball over 2 Wallabies.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that exact moment that I went, okay, this is going to be a long game. That kind of concession so early in the piece speaks volumes to me about a team's intensity from goal line defense. And that was the first test, and we failed straight up. So that put me in a pretty bad frame to watch the rest of the game, and everything was almost coloured by that from there, which is no disrespect to Jonathan Dante, who was probably one of the best players on field and to my mind is the best 12 in the world at the moment. But yeah, that set us up for a long afternoon, and the physicality was somewhere where I thought we just got a little shaded after a really good performance in Dunedin. It's dropped off a bit in my book.
Yeah, Dante, in my mind, is what I want Summer Karevi to be, but injuries have prevented him from doing so. Dante was dominant in the carry, really strong in defense as well, and also is just, if not up there, is clearly the best on-ball defensive 12 in the world. His ability to jackal and just get turnovers from any position within the field is next level. Mitch, your quick read. What went wrong for the Wallabies?
Kicking points. I think it was Carter Gordon's third shot at goal that he actually got one. That's when I started to realize that this World Cup potentially already could be over for the Wallabies if we don't have someone able to take points when they're on offer. We saw that when France got into our 22, they were able to apply pressure to the Wallabies through the scoreboard. They took points when they were on offer. They took penalties when they were 40 meters out for the first few times before they scored tries. And the Wallabies, when they tried to do that, we had 2 shots at goal and we missed. So we're not able to apply that same type of pressure. We went down multiple times into France's 22 and came away without points, which we've seen so far this year for the Wallabies. If you're not able to come away with points when you get entries into the opposition attack zone, it's going to be a long game. And with teams like France, with the outside backs that they have and the prolific try-scoring players that they have in their backline, we need to be taking those opportunities and effectively converting them when we have them.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at the actual stats within the game, and I mean, France only scored 1 more try than us. We scored 3 tries, they scored 4 tries, but we only converted 1 of our tries, the 61st minute Fraser McWright try, whereas Thomas Ramos converted 2, Jaminet got a third, and then Ramos kicked 4 penalties, and Jaminet got a 5th penalty right at the end of the game to extend it out to 41 points for France. And Sergio Ramos is one of the best place kickers in the world currently. He's excellent from the tee. And I'm not saying we need to find in the next week and a half, 2 weeks, a Sergio Ramos, but you're right, Mitch. I think kicking is going to be a weakness. And one of the elements of the French game that was really impressive throughout this was also their close kicking game, or the tactical kicking game is another way of saying that. Just the ability of them to be able to find space, find grass with their kicks, to be able to turn around our defense or play the ball wide enough so that the defensive winger has to come up in the line and commit into the defensive line. And then before the fullback is able to then sweep across and cover that space, they're putting a kick in behind. There was just so much really, really good play from this French outfit that, yeah, look, Australia were poor. Australia were poor in parts, and without a doubt, we need to be better if we want to have a chance of going deep within the World Cup. But this is a French team that's on fire and is clearly favourites in my mind to be lifting the World Cup. Is that a bit presumptive, or was this French team just well and truly outclassing the Wallabies?
I don't think we were outclassed, but we were definitely outthought. So you mentioned the French attacking short kicking game, which was really effective. Obviously, I think it was Jalibert that set up the chip that found Gabin Villiers in the corner on the left side in 63rd minute. And then obviously Dupont's little cross kick for Penal. He did his own chip and chase. But our attacking kicks were good as well. We had the box kick that found Nwanganita-Wase that set up McWright's try. Obviously, there was a little interplay for Vunivalu to get up late in the piece as well. But I thought we were outthought and we were really outpositioned. That's where we got let down. And I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit on Vunivalu's game in total. But defensively, he did get caught out a couple of times that left us short. And I'm thinking specifically of Penal's chip and chase try towards the end, where we saw Vunivalu wearing number 11, supposedly on the left wing, sprinting back across to the right side and leaving a huge hole that Penal just ran through, chipped over Nwanganita-Wase and scored. So I don't think we were outclassed, but we were definitely outthought. And I think those little kinks in our game, they're going to really hurt. And full credit to the French for exploiting them.
Yep, definitely. So why don't we go into a few of the players across both the French and the Wallabies teams who stood up and actually performed relatively well. Mitch, why don't we get two from you before we jump back over to Lockie?
On the Wallaby side, we need to talk about Suli Vunivalu. I think this definitely is his best game of rugby for the Wallabies and probably his best involvement in the game of rugby union since he's come across. Yes, he was found out of position a few times in defence, but the involvements that he had in attack, he was Marika Korobetti-esque at times, just popping up everywhere, getting his hands on the ball, looking for the ball. I didn't say he was better. I said he was just esque. But he was going roaming and he looked hungry and he was having involvements across the field, not just waiting for the ball to come to him on the wing, which we've seen from him so often for the past 2 years in the game of rugby. So I was impressed with the way he did that. I thought he was quite solid under the high ball, took a few good ones. Something we haven't utilized in our players previously in the last few tests. So it was good to have an option to kick across to, and that try that he scored at the end, controversially, whether he was onside or not. I'm sure the French crowd definitely didn't think he was, but the fact that he was able to get up and secure the ball so well and score that try is something that we haven't utilized as much.
Yep. So, Lockie, throwing it over to you then. We've looked at Suli Vunivalu, who was a player, either French or Aussie, who stood out to you.
I was really, really impressed with Dante, as we mentioned before. Damien Penal stood up for me. He was terrific. But I think the player that really shone for me was Thomas Ramos. So you've got a kicker who can just control the game from the tee, but also he kicked really effectively from the hand as well in general play. I think it was maybe midway through the second half, Tom Ramos just dropped the most outrageous 50-22, sort of a banana kick that just with no angle to work with, and it set up the try for Villiers a minute later. So at that point, it was 26-12. McWright's just scored, and the ability to flip pressure in about a 60-second window and put themselves in an attacking 22 off one kick, that speaks volumes to me about a fullback who's totally in control of his game. So I'm expecting big things from Ramos this year. But from our side, I'll throw up a couple of the forwards because they haven't got a mention so far this game. I thought Taniela Tupou had a massive shift. Played really well coming back into it. For the first time in a while, we're actually seeing him being effective in the counter ruck. Yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't that impressed with Tupou this week. And he scrummaged well, I'll grant you that. But I didn't think he had the running game that we've come to expect from him. And I don't think he's 100% game fit for the impact that we see of like Angus Bell had. And I also thought he gave away a few silly penalties that sort of push off the ball early. That high tackle that it was eventually ruled was just careless and didn't need to happen. And he gave away a few penalties just from silly, not getting low enough in tackles and leading with the shoulder, and just simple errors that we've seen creep into his game in the past few weeks.
I think that's pretty tough. So yeah, the high tackle one was careless, but the one where he's penalised for going off his feet, he's made the tackle, got up over the ball, driven past it, and then he's been penalised because the following counter ruck has knocked him over. So it's the Aussie players behind him that have driven it over the ball.
He was on his knees, he was
another
clearly
referee turnover. So I'm going to stick up for him. I thought he had a pretty good game. And also, we'd like him to be running 3, but also I'd like a 3 that can just be solid. We don't need to have a outrageous ball runner. Look at a Franz Malherbe or a Uni Antonio, just big boys who can set a scrum. That's what I'd like from a tight head. When you've got a Bell, when you've got other big timber around us that can run, a Tupou running ball is luxury for mine. So I was really happy to see Bell and Tupou on the same starting side. I think that's a huge tick for us. And then another one who I thought had a great crack, Fraser McWright, looked really comfortable at that level.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that Fraser McWright was excellent throughout. I mean, his try was just brilliantly taken with the way he accelerated onto the ball in that moment. A player that I thought stood up particularly well was Bobby Valentini. So he basically, I don't remember an opportunity or a time where he got driven back within the carry. He seemed to almost always be getting over the gain line, which is rare against a French defence that was rushing up and targeting our initial receiving forward pod almost immediately as they got the ball. And that actually speaks to a broader question about Australian tactics or the Australian approach within the game, because we saw a couple of times off set piece play where we did have a bit more depth or opportunity or space in which our back line could play, that we were able to get some really good width on the play, and Mark Nwangani got a try early on from that. But what I thought kept happening was we kept trying to play within our forward pod system, but their rush defense would come up and shut their pod down before they had a chance to really do much with it. And so we'd be driven back, either wouldn't have made the gain line or be driven back a little bit more every single time we had to play. So what I would have loved to have seen is not just to fling it out early and kind of hit and hope and see if we can get outside or over the top of the rush D, but is to either consider using our short kicking game a little bit more with players like Vunivalu and Nwangani Tawase in there, or have hard runners cutting unders lines in against around the edges of the ruck, the previous ruck, just to force the defense to have to compress a little bit before we can then go a little bit wider. Because it seemed like we just tried to keep going one phase out and it would not move. It was not getting any pay for it. But a lot of that comes down to that typical Sean Edwards defense that is so often touted by the French. Sean Edwards coming across from the England system, being an ex-league coach. He basically just makes them work hard, rush up, shut down opportunities, stay connected, work really, really hard. So in a broad sense, I think France are incredibly deserving winners in this game. We've spoken about a couple of players that stood out. Like we already mentioned, Dante was excellent, man. How much are we missing Len Ikitau at the moment, Mitch, in the Aussie midfield?
It's definitely starting to come back and bite us on the butt. This week, we definitely missed Samu Krevi as well. No disrespect to our centre pairing. Did Pattaya start? Did he come on?
Paquette at 12, Pattaya 13.
Yeah, so I thought he did, but I don't recall him doing a great deal in the first half, and only sort of really took notice of him in the second half. I also didn't think Fekete had the greatest game at 12 either, and whether that just comes down to combinations and the fact that he hasn't played a lot of rugby at this level with Geordie Pattaya, with Carter Gordon as well. Questions around tactics and selection we can probably get into in a little bit in the preparation for this test. But yeah, I didn't think that our centre pairing was as strong, particularly again, as France was and how dominant they were. We definitely didn't, hold a shadow to the impact that those guys had on the game.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough to imagine that a team that I think the 10, 12, 13 pairing had never played together. So you've got Gordon with a Fekete Pattaya combination, both of them coming off injuries. plus a right winger exclusively for his career, now playing on the left for a game. And then there's so many combinations in that back line that were never going to click from the get-go in this game. So I think throwing Fiketti and Pataya to the Wolves against Domti and Fiku was a huge challenge. And I think, for the by and large, they got dusted, which you'd expect. 80+ thousand people at Stade de France, one of the world's best 12s, Gael Fickou, who's no slouch. That's a massive test, and I'd much rather see it, and I'm sure you'd agree, see us have this game now before the World Cup than in the middle of it, against a Fiji or against a Wales. If anything, we can hopefully blow the cobwebs off this, say, thanks very much. It's our last trial. Let's scrap the 5 games that we haven't won this year and put it all down to learning.
We'll start fresh.
The heist.
That's right.
Mitch, do you want to jump in here with some comments about from Taniela Tupou on the game plan?
Yeah, so there's an article that came out on the Raw this morning, and there's some comments in there that Taniela Tupou has made. And I don't know whether this was just through an interview that he did on the stand coverage, because I didn't watch much after the game, or whether it was like an interview he did with the journos. But from what he was saying, the game plan that the Wallabies used today was a game plan that Eddie Jones basically came up with at the beginning of the week for France. The team that they had selected and this game plan was just purely for this game, and that they've been training for the World Cup, and they're playing a completely different game plan, completely different style when they get to the World Cup. And he said, I was impressed that the boys got pay in a number of areas. We got a few penalties from the scrum. We scored a few tries. We weren't he didn't say that they weren't expecting to win, but basically that this was a game that they had earmarked as, let's test combinations, let's play a different style, let's not show our hand for what we're going to play in the World Cup. How much do you read into those comments? Do you think that's true? Do you think that that's something that the Wallabies would have done? It does seem very Eddie Jones.
And that's the part of it that makes me think that there might be some truth to it. Also, I just want to clutch at straws and try to find something positive to look forward to for the World Cup itself. That maybe this performance and the way they approach this game was not indicative of how they're going to be playing in a World Cup, hopefully. But at the same time, I mean, there are some pretty key areas where we're getting dusted and done. Like defensive positioning is not good enough. Not being able to stand up to hard runners coming at kind of 10-12 channel isn't good enough. And that's not a game plan thing. That's just a physicality and capacity to respond to the winning the collision element of rugby union. And so, they can say all that they want about having an overall game plan that they're saving for the World Cup. But if you're not actually able to execute on the fundamentals of the game, like our lineout was shocking throughout this match and really didn't seem to respond to how France was putting pressure on them. I just think it's clutching at straws a bit. Lockie, am I being too harsh?
No, I was actually, that leads me on really nicely because I wanted to talk about the line-out briefly. The back-to-back line-out steals around the 50th minute when we had all the ball, all the territory, all the pressure, and Tommy Hooper goes up at the front and gets picked off back-to-back. That was schoolboy stuff. It wasn't even a contest in the air. He was out-footed. The French jumper got a shoulder in front of him and was coming across on the line of the ball before Hooper could even get a sniff twice. So, I mean, that's stuff that concerns me more than the physicality, which is obviously critical. But, you're 2 weeks out from the World Cup and you're not executing an attacking line out in 22. Like, that's frustrating. That's frustrating to see when we've had a TRC campaign. We've had the extra Bledisloe and Dunedin. And to see, in my mind, a regression, as I mentioned earlier, that's frustrating.
And I guess what's frustrating too in that area of regression from the game the Wallabies last played in Dunedin to this week, and we have seen this from the Wallabies for the past few years, is giving away simple penalties and just taking the pressure off the opposition. You can do 15 phases of really good attacking style rugby, mark your way up the field. You get into the 22 and someone gives away a penalty for sealing off or, just really simple errors that we aren't able to execute well enough. And that's what's frustrating is against the All Blacks in Dunedin, the Wallabies looked polished and they didn't give away a heap of penalties. They looked like they were playing a game plan. They were getting back on their feet quickly. They weren't lying around the breakdown and the ruck. They weren't giving away those simple penalties that we've come to expect. And this week, those penalties were coming back into the game. And that was what was frustrating, that we've taken one step forward and we've named a fairly similar team in a lot of regards to that test in Dunedin, yet that error has come back into the game, that we're giving away those penalties. And in the way that international rugby is shaping at the moment, when you give the opposition options of 3 points in your own half, they're going to take it every day. And that's what we saw this week, that 16-5 at halftime, the Wallabies didn't look like getting back up into the opposition half and scoring tries. That's actually another point that I've just thought about too. Our attacking maul has not been effective since Laurie Fisher and Dan McKellar left at the end of last year.
Not enough Brumbies.
We've had so many options on the opposition try line, and we process from line out to maul, and then oppositions either sack us, take us out, collapse it legally. We just aren't effectively scoring points off that set piece.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what that's for that point, I do actually wonder if they've got a few more set plays that they're looking to use. They didn't seem to try any particular variations in the attacking mauls that they were able to execute on. And so that makes me think, yeah, they wouldn't just be doing the same old game plan again and again in terms of just bring it down and try and push on through. Every team has a couple of go-to variations that they use. And I feel like it has to be a choice for the Wallabies to not be putting those into this game. So maybe in that particular element, yeah, they could have been holding things back. But again, it could have just been poor execution and poor line-out leadership as well. I mean, I'd like to hope for something better, but they could have just been bad. It's entirely possible as well.
But we're saving all the cards that he's got up his sleeve.
All the reds, all the yellows.
Oh, yeah.
We have Australia A to chat about in a moment. But what I wanted to talk about, we haven't actually had a chance previously to break down the Wallabies team that Eddie Jones named this week. 2 players got their debut this week, Blake Shop and Isaac Fines-Liliuasa. The first person that I want to call out for Australian rugby, and I feel has been completely let down by the system yet again, is Ryan Lonergan. How unfair does it feel for him to have been in the Wallabies squad now? Was he selected in the wider training squad last year?
Yep.
He definitely was there in the TRC this year. But he has been in the Wallabies training squad for 2 years now and has not played a minute, has not made his debut. Isaac Fines-Liliuasa comes into camp at the naming of the World Cup, and the first test he gets given minutes off the bench. That's just so frustrating for a player like Ryan Lonergan, who we know what he can do. We know he's the future. We know his leadership qualities. Yet he hasn't been given that opportunity to show what he can do at test level. He's just been holding tackle bags. I don't know. It doesn't sit great with me that he hasn't been given the due diligence and the minutes and the opportunity that a player like Isaac Fines has.
Yeah, look, you need a good kicker as well. You need a good kicker. Just bring in Ryan Lonergan. But Lockie?
No, look, I agree with the sentiment around Lonergan in the sense that he has been earmarked as a future Wallaby and a leader at that as well. I know that he skippered Auze in the Portugal game, which we'll touch on in a tick. But, I mean, also, I don't want this to take away from the debutants. Like Isaac Fines-Liliuasa is 27. He's played through Queensland's system. He played QPR. He's bounced between Brumbies and Force to get his crack. And I don't think we're going to begrudge a guy for finally earning that Wallaby cap. But, yeah, I agree. It's tough. It's tough to see Lonergan. But if Eddie's going to go down this utility, 6-2, 7-1, 8-0 split, whatever it comes down to, Fines-Liliuasa being able to cover halfback and be really speedy as well, it does come into consideration. But I totally get the frustrations.
Yeah, and look, we do need to increase the the appearances of force players within the Wallabies setup, and so he's a deserving candidate of getting that tokenistic in introduction and improvement into the Wallabies. So well done.
Ooh.
I know.
Well, Ben Donaldson's a force player too, and he's the chosen boy under Eddie Jones. Did you guys catch Eddie Jones's comments in the lead up to this test around Ben Donaldson? That he accidentally let slip that the reason that he's been selected is basically because he plays for Randwick. So they asked a question around Ben Donaldson and what he's been bringing off the training paddock, and he said he's had a really good past few years at Randwick. He knows the style that we play, the style that Randwick is known for, and he said we, and then he was like, oh, sorry, I mean them. And he had to really backtrack there, but it was pretty evident that he likes him so much because he's a Randwick player.
If they win a shoot shield, they can win a World Cup, right? That seems fair.
That's how it works. That's what people in SIU say.
Let's keep moving though. Let's get into the Auss game now. Ando, you've caught a little bit of this. We understand. Somehow you've
I've caught a bit. So
a stream.
Portugal Rugby TV, which is a thing I didn't know that existed. They streamed the match, and so if you go onto quick plug our Discord channel and you go into the international rugby section, you can see the link being provided there to catch this stream. It's a legit one. You're not going to any dodgy websites or anything like that, but you will need to skip through to the game. I watched about half an hour of it. And what I basically saw is that you're going to have our entire second string team play Portugal. There were a couple of decent players. I don't know their names. I'm sorry, I haven't watched any of Portugal over the last couple of years, but their scrum half looked pretty good when I was watching. And one of their wingers as well looked like he had a fair bit of skill and speed. But for my mind, the 30-17 win should have been a lot more emphatic. Basically, what kept happening was basically the Australian way of playing rugby, which is to have some really good moments and opportunities to put a lot of pressure on the opposition and then to drop or needlessly infringe right as you're getting into the try-scoring opportunity. So the vast majority of the time, the Aussie A players were getting themselves into good places and then just either dropping the ball cold, obstruction calls, going off.
Or Lockie Swin took someone's head off.
Oh, he actually played really well. The part of the game that I watched and the reviews that I read about the game indicate Lockie Swinton actually did quite well. Admittedly, it's against a Portuguese defense, which doesn't have the physicality of the Tier 1 nations. But he was running hard, providing a lot of physicality within his running game. He did well. Got to give him that.
He's a funny one, Swinno, because he actually played really well against Tonga before he did his noodle at the end and got sent off. So, we almost wonder whether he's become a bit of a forgotten man in that back row setup. Everyone's talking up Tom Hooper, Rob Leota. We've got these big sixes. But, rewind, to 2020 and 2019. And that was Lockie Swinton up and coming. So maybe he does have a role to play.
The problem with Lockie Swinton at the moment is that you can't, as a coach, you can't rely on him to not give away a penalty when it's crucial. And we've seen it for the Waratahs. He's given away penalties. He's given away cards. He's hurt the team that he's playing for. And whilst he can have good involvement, and he did this week for Australia A, realistically, he lost us that test against Tonga for giving away that silly penalty. So at the moment, it's kind of like, is he bringing enough good to overcome the negative and the fact that he's going to give you a card or potentially a red card? Can you select him knowing that you've got enough coverage on the bench to get through the game without that? That's the question at the moment.
Maybe with the 7-1 split.
The classic 7-1 split. I wouldn't be surprised to see Eddie Jones do that, but then have Josh Kemeny as the one, someone who can cover the entire back line.
Hey, the Box did.
Boys, before we finish up on Australia A and get into some of the other results around the weekend, Ando, you said you saw some of the game. How did James O'Connor go?
I didn't see enough of it to get a bit of a verdict on him. Sorry, I don't have enough to say.
But Lockie and I were
just been
talking.
Making stuff up.
Oh, you've just been making it up. Okay. Lockie and I were talking in it off air throughout the week around James O'Connor, and I've got a theory that James O'Connor is a lot closer to a Wallabies recall than we probably have thought in the past. We're one injury in the centres from James O'Connor being recalled into the Wallaby squad. If we lose Feketi, if we lose Pataya, James O'Connor parachutes straight in. And in some ways, I was also saying to Lockie this week that in my books, James O'Connor would be the perfect person currently to be the Wallabies captain instead of Will Skelton. Just the trajectory of his career, the fact that he's come home, that he's led Queensland to a Super Rugby AU title, that he's stuck it out at home. He's turned away contracts for big money over in France. He's done right by the Australian rugby system to give him the chance at the World Cup to captain the team, to almost be that prodigal son in a way that Will Skelton has kind of done the opposite. And this week, I don't think Will Skelton had the impact on the game this week to justify his naming of captain. But we will see how he goes throughout the rest of the tournament.
God, you don't like Will Skelton, do you?
No, I do like Will Skelton. I just don't like the fact that he's not Australian based. And I think James Slipper should be our captain over him, or someone who plays rugby in Australia.
French World Cup. It's different rules for Eddie. I don't know. And just thinking on this quickly, and I know we'll wrap it up after this. I like the James O'Connor narrative. I really do. I buy into it. They're going overseas. You play for Sale. You play for Toulon. Come back with the Reds. It's been a really interesting path. But I think we've just collectively, as rugby fans, we'll put aside our critic hat. As rugby fans, I think we just need to back Will Skelton because he's had one test. He's had one test as skipper. And with this tournament base, I know it's going to be a short-term thing. I just get that sense that this is Eddie's sort of raid captain, if you will. And we can't throw him away after one game in the hot seat. Otherwise, we'd have thousands of Wallaby captains, not just the very select 80 or so that we've had throughout history. So I'm going to get behind him. But if O'Connor pops in as the number 22 or number 23 and is riding the pine for those first few World Cup campaign games, I'm not surprised at all. He fills the same role as Ben Donaldson in covering 10-15, plus he can cover 12-13. Plus he's played test level on the wing. I can't think of a better suited person to plug gaps come a tight World Cup game than James.
Plus he can kick a goal.
Plus caps. Yeah, he can. He's been doing it for decades. So, that'd be my pick for a bolter heading into the first game against Georgia in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, why don't we move into the other internationals from across the weekend, because there was a lot of rugby that was played for the warm-up. Mitch, are we going to dive straight into it, or should we have a quick break?
Let's have a quick break so people can go get a drink and then come back and dive into some of the juicy games we've had.
All right, let's go. All right, the most impressive news from the weekend was the Springboks 35-7 demolition of the All Blacks over in France. And now I could say the words of my headmaster at school, who's a Kiwi, who claimed that this doesn't really matter because it was just, it's not the warm-up. And it's better to get this type of game out of the way before the World Cup anyway. But that's loser talk. Really, the Springboks got absolutely on fire through something and demolished the All Blacks. And it wasn't a case of the All Blacks being poor. It was a case of the physicality and the directness of the Springboks overwhelming the All Blacks. So, Mitch, starting off with you, this game was a statement from the Springboks. What did you take away from it?
Leading into this game and through the Rugby Championship, South Africa had been good, but I wasn't convinced that they were coming into this World Cup as favourites to go back-to-back. This game has really shaken my foundations. They did everything so well in this game, that I don't see them. If they play like this and they play to this level for the full tournament, I don't see anyone coming close. They dominated New Zealand in every facet of the game. New Zealand has been speaking all year around how with their new scrum coach that their maul has been so effective that they haven't, conceded maul tries. They haven't, no maul has been collapsed, or they've successfully scored points through their maul X amount of times. South Africa scored 3 tries through their maul this game, and New Zealand didn't come close to conceding or to scoring points through their maul. It was just an absolute masterclass that their set piece, their maul particularly, is such a weapon that they can 95% be pretty confident when they go to line out that they're going to come away with points, whether it's through scoring the try or the opposition doing something illegal, collapsing it, giving away a card, penalty try, or a penalty to kick the points.
Yep, jumping across to Lockie now. Main takeaway.
Just quickly on the lineouts as well, the maul was so effective, but 2 other tries were from more variations. So you had the blindside play with Khaleesi hitting marks to open the second half, and just there's like a dagger in the heart after half time. And then the sneaky move up the middle of the lineout through Quagga Smith. I mean, they've got weapons everywhere from that lineout set piece. It's really scary. And when you look at from a Wallaby perspective, our lineout defense, I'm thinking that's going to be tough to handle. That's going to be very tough to handle. But the main takeaway was the brutality of the Springbok, not only Springbok forwards, but the centre pairing as well. You had ball runners coming from the back fence and from all angles. It was constant sustained pressure. And even though it was, still 0-0 after the first 15 minutes, it never looked like the game was going any other way, because the Springboks were running so hard into contact and they forced those first yellow cards. And when Khaleesi goes over at 7-0, I was always thinking, okay, this is it. This is where this game's going. It was, for mine, a statement win in the sense of World Cup games are won by pressure. They're won by converting pressure into points and grinding teams into the ground. And that has me in no doubt now that the Springboks are in my top 2 favoured sides to take this out this year, aside with Australia, of course.
Oh, aside from Australia, the underdogs obviously are top of the list there. But within this, it could be quite easy to point to Scott Barrett's second yellow card, so totaling a red in the 39th minute. I was thinking, actually, just as a quick tangent, that Scott Barrett seems to have a penchant now for getting red cards. But it's only his second one ever. It just felt really important when he got it against the Wallabies in Perth back in 2019 or 2020, whenever it was. But in any way,
speaking to that point though, Endo. Sorry, can I just yep.
I was just going to finish my point, and then you can jump on in.
Yep.
It could be really easy to look at the Scott Barrett red card and say, well, New Zealand lost because they had a red card for half the game. But they were 14-0 down by that point, and things were not going well in their favour. Mitch?
I was just going to say that Scott Barrett is the type of player that you can rile up and you can goad into giving away penalties and doing silly things like the second yellow that he did. Like, that was such an unnecessary clean out against Marks. There was nothing legal about that at all. He's come from distance. He's lost his feet. He's tucked his arm. Like, just completely stupid. Complete brain fart from him, particularly when he's already on one yellow card already. But that, again, linking back to the point, is the pressure that South Africa put them under. New Zealand is known for putting pressure on oppositions, forcing mistakes. They have very rarely been tested to this level of when things go wrong, how do we get out of this hole? And this All Blacks team this weekend didn't have any answers. And they were making mistakes. They were giving away penalties. They were getting frustrated. And once the points started to pile up, you could tell that the players were frustrated, but they had no one that was stepping up and saying, okay, this is what we need to do. Nothing was working for them. And the Springboks just kept going from level to level, from gear to gear to gear, turning the screws. And you could just tell that the players were sort of overawed at points.
A couple of the players who stood out for the Boks, I mean, Lockie, you already mentioned the midfield combination of Andre Esterhuizen and Kalen Moody. They both Moody had 3 runs for 70 meters and Esterhausen 7 runs for 60. So they're getting incredible amount of pay. You also Damien Valemzi at fullback, 14 runs, 104 meters as well. Like excellent meters there and opportunities for those players to be making breaks. But a really interesting stat is the overall tackle completion percentage. So the Boks only made 80% of their tackles, which I always find interesting until I remember the way in which they choose to defend, which is to play that rush umbrella defense, which is trying to put pressure and force a bit of chaos into the attacking line, and then trust the cover defense to be able to come across and make good what chaos they've created. So yeah, I always find that one a bit interesting in terms of the willingness to let missed tackles exist in terms of the broader approach to pressuring or breaking up the attacking play of the opposition. Key area that New Zealand really struggled with were the lineouts. They only won 66% or 10 of 15 of their own lineouts. And so that is itself an area where the Boks were able to put pressure on. But look, if we're to see the positives from a Kiwi perspective, it's not the World Cup. It was the warm-up to the World Cup. And so on that note, why don't we move on to
I love the
other World Cup
the
matches.
comment that Ian Foster made after the game, and whether it was in the press conference or in the interview, which was just that this loss has taken all pressure off us. This is exactly what we needed, because now the pressure's off us. No one thinks we're favorites anymore, and we can just cruise through the World Cup.
Oh, what
I was like, geez, that's an interesting outlook.
That's a spin doctor right there. That's a bit of marketing.
If there was one trophy we didn't want, it was this one. I was like, yeah, good on you, Ian. How's the job hunt going?
Moving on to the other matches, Mitch. Let's keep this rolling. And we're going to start off with a historic win by Fiji versus England. 22 to England, 30 to Fiji. This was an incredible game. Lockie, sum it up for us, my friend.
History. And frankly, Pool C now looks totally horrifying from a Wallaby perspective. You've got the Flying Fijians beating England for the first time in their 7 matches, beating them at Twickenham, and coming from behind to do it. I mean, it wasn't easy for them. They were down. England had the early try through Johnny May, and then I think Celestino Rabatamunda, product of the Fijian Drua, had the game of his life, ripped apart the English backline, terrorized the back 3 all day. And they outclassed them in every single way. Caleb Muntz kicked well. And they were at one stage, they were out to a 20 points to 8 lead midway through the second half. And Twickenham was silent except for the back corner of Fijian fans going absolutely off chops. So looking at this holistically, Fijian played a really good all-round game. They kicked their penalties when they came up. They executed at set piece, and they rattled them in contact. It was a really good performance from the Fijians, Mitch.
I'm scared. I've got to say, I'm scared. I saw this result, and I was wondering, going into the game, did England sort of poop the bed here, or did Fiji really turn the sword and deservedly win this? And Fiji did. To their credit, they put England under a lot of pressure, and they took their opportunities and they scored some incredible tries, some incredible attacking rugby on display. How good it is to see the Fijian Drua backbone that is forming this team, some of the players making that step up into the national side. Fiji is going to be a real weapon in this World Cup. And as a Wallabies fan, particularly after this morning's game, I'm pretty nervous of how this game could go. If we don't bring our A game against Fiji, they have all of the skills at their disposal to put a number on us. They've got momentum now. One thing I will say before I throw back to Ando, how fantastic was it to see Vinaya Habosi back playing rugby for Fiji? We missed him this year in Super Rugby. I know there was a little bit of off-field stuff and there was a reason why he wasn't playing, but how good was it to see the boss man back out there smashing blokes and just making everyone look like children?
Look, the best part of this entire experience is watching England go down again and having more and more pain and misery heaped upon them under Steve Borthwick. Now, I have nothing against Steve Borthwick, but I have everything against the nation of England itself. And so very, very happy for more misery and pain to be heaped upon them as a nation as a whole. So
It is
more
amazing
power
how
to you,
Eddie
Fiji.
Jones can still get blamed.
Yeah, like,
After
it's still
6
Eddie
or
Jones.
7 test matches.
Yep, still his fault. Everything is his fault. But Italy versus Japan. Italy getting up 42-21 against Japan. Lockie, again, I believe you're the one that's seen the majority of this game. Can you give us just a quick overview before we then cover some of the other matches from the weekend as well?
Yeah, 100%. The takeaway is that Melbourne Rebels got dudded getting Monty Ioane when he scored more tries in this game than he did in the full season down at Amy. That was ridiculous to see him play that well. His hat-trick was class. It was total class. He ended up pulling out the match winner. But we look back at this game and, yeah, it's blown out towards the end. But, my God, it was 28-21 with 4 minutes to play. Japan were well in this. So I think all the chatter around Japan not being up for it at the moment is totally false because that scoreline flattered Italy. Yes, Monty Ioane had a great game, ended up picking up that hat-trick. Seeing Ange Capuzzo is one of the great joys of rugby at the moment. He was playing on the wing too to accommodate a different fullback, and he still ripped and tore on that far side as well. He was playing on the right wing. But I'd be worried for Italy. I don't think they're going to progress. I'm under no illusions. They're in a pool with France and New Zealand. So they're the two that are going through. But I believe that Italy will scare the absolute hell out of one of those teams with the way that their backs are playing, because you've got Tommaso Allen running around, Paolo Garbisi, Steve Varney is an excellent halfback, and they've got real weapons out on the wings with, Pierre Bruno, Capuzzo, Ioane. This is a team that's going to score points in the World Cup.
So
completely
you've
agree.
Got Italy beating New Zealand.
I've got Italy topping
that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, Italy topping the pool, absolutely. And spare a thought for who else is in their pool? Was it Chile? No, they're pool D. Regardless. No, Italy's not progressing, but they're going to scare some people.
As well they should. Let's move on to a couple of the other games. I'll talk through Ireland, Samoa, and then, Lockie, I might throw back to you for Scotland, Georgia. So Ireland got up 17 over Samoa 13. It was definitely an Irish second-string team, not their full starting complement. But either way, this was a wonderful match from Samoa, incredibly close. And if it wasn't for some poor execution in the 73rd, 74th minute of, actually 77th minute of the game, then Samoa very well could have come away with this win. Lima Sopawanga missed a really easy kick into touch. Luckily, got the ball back again for another kick and finally found touch, got the line out, which they promptly then gave away to Ireland. So there were a couple of opportunities.
Intercept try?
No, that was earlier.
No, that was earlier. Duncan Power, yeah.
I've seen that.
Absolutely brilliant. He goes for the intercept, gets touches the Ireland player, goes straight into his face. No, God, did he knock it on? It's like, no, just hit him in the face. So, look, taking from this game, I think we'll see what we're seeing is the benefit of the changed eligibility rules by World Rugby to allow players who maybe had left Australia, had left Australia or New Zealand primarily, I should say, who've gone and played overseas for a number of years, come back and play for either the country of origin or ancestry. And it has been an excellent opportunity for countries like Samoa, Fiji, and Tonga, Samoa and Tonga particularly, to have these star-studded players such as Lima Sopawanga come back into the team. And so they're going to give some of the more established teams within the World Cup a really big challenge, and Ireland experienced that over the weekend. Lockie, throwing to you, Scotland versus Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. And another great lesson in how scary Pool C is, Georgia actually led at halftime. Yes, the Scots ended up running away with it, but Georgia was up 6-0 at halftime and looked the better side until about probably 45, 46 minutes in. So really good Georgian counterattack as well. We always talk about the scrum and them running around. But their counterattack was regularly pulling apart Scotland in the first half. I think one about 20 minutes in went 60 metres, ended up getting over the goal line. So they had the Scots under immense pressure. But the dam was always going to burst because this Scottish team is full of class. And once again, it's the Finn Russell, Duan van der Merwe combination. They were carving up all day. I think Dewey's probably in the top 2 or 3 wingers in the world at the moment on form, up there with Damien Penaud and Kurtley Aronsa. He's just in sublime form. So it's great that the Scots keep robbing South Africa, keep doing it. But then, a couple of Aussies popping up their head. Jack Dempsey went over towards the end, and I think the Georgians just ran out of puff. But there's enough there to suggest that, yes, Georgia will be scary, but Scots still, in my book, have a chance to potentially sneak through their pool of death too.
Mate, there's part of me that absolutely hates that Jack Dempsey is playing for Scotland. I just can't handle that right now. It's just the worst. But that's a conversation for another time. Let's quickly pop on now into the next match, which was Argentina versus Spain, I believe. That's the emblem for Spain.
Yep.
And this was a dominant 62-3 victory. So did any of you guys catch this game? I haven't had a chance to watch any of it, so I have no insight. No. Okay, let's move on. 62-3. Well done, Argentina. Spain, better luck next time. And we're going to move now just for a quick comment on the world rankings. So I'll just quickly go through from 1 to 10. Ireland, New Zealand, South Africa, France, Scotland, England, Argentina, Australia, Fiji, and Wales. So what this is showing us is currently, is this the most updated one? Didn't we have Fiji at number 7? Wasn't that what we were saying earlier?
We did. Yeah, I thought I had updated that. I don't know what happened there.
Oh, it hasn't come across. Okay, so either way, we should actually have Fiji above Australia and Wales. And so what this actually means is that the Australian pool, we are in pool C. All of us are ranked basically 8th through to 10th or 11th within a World Cup rankings, and it just kind of shows us what Australian rugby is at the moment. But also, we can say that Pool C is going to be easy, but actually we've got a lot of teams around our level that we're going to struggle with. Lockie, how confident are you that we're actually going to be able to get through the pool unscathed?
We're progressing. I have no doubt that we're progressing, but I am seriously concerned about complacency. So we come into it in our first games against Georgia, which I think actually works for us because Wales and Fiji play each other straight off the bat. And I think they're playing for a quarterfinal spot straight off the bat. They don't get any second chances after that. You drop that first game, historically, it's very difficult to kick on unless you're South Africa in 2019. So we've got a really good recipe for Australia here to go in against Georgia. I think you play one of your strongest teams and you get those combinations sorted because otherwise, back-to-back games against Fiji and Wales, by then the pool's already decided. Yes, Portugal, it's still a test match. It's still important and will put out a strong team. But that's one that you're banking 5 points in the back of your mind on. So we get one chance. We get one chance to get things right against Georgia before Fiji, then Wales. And I think we'll be doing enough to top that pool.
Yep. Very well said. Well, I think what that leads us to is...
We will do a preview next week. Hold on. Give me 1 second because I have just updated the slide and we do need to do it properly because there has been a fair bit of movement.
All right.
Whoa, there we go.
So to read through it properly, in first we have Ireland. In second we have South Africa. Third, France. Fourth, New Zealand. Now, New Zealand have moved down 2 spaces. South Africa has moved up 3, and France has moved up 4. Scotland in 5th, Argentina in 6th, Fiji in 7th, England in 8th, Australia in 9th, and Wales in 10th. So that is how things currently sit 2 weeks out from the World Cup. Does that change your thoughts at all?
Yeah. Look, for me, no, because we knew what Fiji were capable of prior to this. I don't think it's any particular surprise there. What I'm particularly enjoying, I know Australian rugby over the last few years has not been where it should be. So I'm under no illusions that we should be say, top 4 within the world or something like that. I don't expect that right now. But like I said before, I'm really enjoying that England is currently plummeting down. And they're currently 8th within the world ranking. So enjoy that one, you pommy bums. But let's finish off now the pod. It has been a lot of fun being here with both of you. Thank you so much. We are, if I just jump onto the World Rugby website, we are 11 days, 8 hours, and 2 minutes away from the Rugby World Cup for 2023, which
Cannot
is
wait.
incredibly exciting. So, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you get involved with our Super Brew tipping competition, which will be available on all of our social media profiles. Also, don't forget to jump onto Discord as well in order to come and be a part of the best Australian rugby community going around. And then lastly, please consider going to ko-fi.com/pick-and-drive-rugby to either give us a one-off or ongoing donation. Anything would assist in improving the quality and regularity of the pod. So thank you so much. Lockie, it's been a pleasure. Mitch, it's been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have a wonderful week and we'll catch you next time. Bye.